I want my name on the paperwork, Jessica. After 7 years, I deserve to be more than just the husband of PixelPerfect Design. Drew's voice cut through the ambient jazz music of Corsica, Portland's most exclusive restaurant. The champagne, in my glass, poured moments earlier to celebrate our anniversary, trembled as my hand tightened around the stem. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The waiter approaching with our appetizers slowed his pace, sensing the tension, then discreetly retreated. This conversation isn't appropriate for our anniversary dinner, I whispered, conscious of nearby diners. Drew's expression hardened as he leaned forward, his cologne suddenly overwhelming. When is it appropriate then? You've been dodging this for months. I'm tired of being introduced as Jessica's husband at your industry events while you collect awards and sign new clients. Half of everything you've built happened during our marriage. His voice grew louder with each word. And I want what's legally mine. I met Drew Parker 9 years ago at a design conference in Seattle. I was 28, 3 years into building my fledgling graphic design business, PixelPerfect, sleeping 4 hours a night and pouring every cent of profit back into the company. He was 32, charismatic, and working for a venture capital firm with the kind of confidence that came from an Ivy League education and family money. We connected over drinks at the conference mixer, me nursing one cocktail to save money, him ordering top-shelf whiskey without glancing at the price. "You're the most interesting person in this room," he told me that night, his blue eyes focused entirely on me while CEOs and investors tried to get his attention. I was flattered, exhausted, and completely unprepared for someone like Drew to notice me. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Weekend trips to wine country, surprise deliveries of lunch to my tiny office, thoughtful gifts that showed he'd been listening when I mentioned a favorite book or artist. I was working 16-hour days, trying to establish my business, and Drew seemed to understand my drive. "You remind me of the founders we invest in," he'd say admiringly. "That hunger, that vision, it's rare." When we moved in together 6 months later, he paid for our apartment upgrade without blinking, waving away my concerns about contributing equally. "You're investing in your business. I'm investing in our life together. That's what partners do." The proposal came at the 18-month mark during a surprise trip to Cannon Beach. Standing on the sand with haystack rocks silhouetted against the sunset, Drew presented a diamond ring that must have cost more than my annual profit margin. "You're going places, Jessica Taylor," he said, "and I want to be by your side when you get there." It was romantic, perfect, the kind of moment that should have had me saying yes without hesitation. Instead, I felt a flutter of unease. Everything was moving so fast. My business was finally gaining traction, with 2 new corporate clients and the possibility of hiring my first employee. The timing felt off. "I love you," I said, "but marriage is a big step. My company is at a critical point right now." Drew's smile dimmed slightly before he recovered. "That's exactly why this makes sense. You need stability at home while you're taking risks with the business. I can provide that." He brushed hair from my face with his free hand. "Plus, my family's lawyers are excellent. They'll make sure you're protected." When I still hesitated, he added, "We can do a prenup if that makes you more comfortable. I know how important PixelPerfect is to you." That was the right thing to say. The prenuptial agreement took 3 months to finalize, with my lawyer and his family's legal team negotiating terms. Drew seemed amused by my insistence on protecting my company. "It's cute how seriously you're taking this," he said one night as I reviewed the latest draft. "The business is barely clearing 6 figures. My investment portfolio makes that an interest." Still, he signed the final document, which included a clause specifically stating that PixelPerfect would remain my sole property regardless of the marriage's duration, with clear language preventing any future claims to ownership or profits. There was also a lifestyle clause, something his lawyer added, stating that any significant change in behavior or breach of trust could trigger a penalty payment to the wronged party. We married at the Portland Art Museum, a compromise between Drew's mother's preference for a country club wedding and my desire for something with creative character. The event was featured in Oregon Bride magazine, not because we sought the publicity, but because Drew's family connections made it happen. "Great exposure for your little company," his mother said with a thin smile when she showed me the glossy spread. I didn't correct her that my little company had just landed its first major tech client and was projected to break $500,000 in revenue that year. The early years of marriage were good. Drew supported my late nights and weekend work sessions. He networked on my behalf, introducing me to potential clients among his colleagues and friends. He didn't complain when I reinvested profits instead of upgrading our lifestyle. "Build your empire," he'd say. "I'm playing the long game here." When I won my first major design award and cried from the validation after years of struggle, he held me and said he was proud. When a competing offer came in to acquire PixelPerfect 3 years into our marriage, a tempting sum that would have set us up comfortably, Drew was the one who convinced me to turn it down. "You're just getting started," he insisted. "This is your baby. Don't sell yourself short." By our 5th anniversary, PixelPerfect had 18 employees, offices in a renovated warehouse in Portland's Pearl District, and a reputation as one of the West Coast's most innovative boutique branding agencies. We'd worked with startups that became household names and established companies looking to refresh their image. I'd been profiled in Fast Company and named to a 40 under 40 list. Drew had transitioned to a more senior role at his firm, one that required less travel and more management. Our lives had fallen into a comfortable rhythm: success at work, dinner parties with carefully cultivated social circles, discussions about whether to start a family that always ended with, maybe, next year, as we both focused on our careers. The first subtle shift came when Drew started dropping by my office unannounced. "Just wanted to surprise my successful wife," he'd say, charming my team while pulling me away from work for impromptu lunches. He began questioning business decisions: the clients I took on, the projects I declined, the employees I hired. "Just offering a different perspective," he'd say when I pointed out that he wasn't part of my company. At industry events, he'd interrupt my conversations with potential clients to offer his insights on market trends. Several times I returned from the restroom to find him exchanging contact information with people I'd been cultivating relationships with. "I'm helping," he insisted when I expressed frustration. "You're too in the weeds sometimes. I see the bigger picture." Then came the suggestions about company structure. "You should consider bringing on a business partner," he said over dinner one night. "Someone to handle the business side while you focus on the creative. Every successful agency has that division of labor." When I asked if he had someone in mind, he smiled. "Well, I do have an MBA and connections in the industry. It makes sense, doesn't it? I've been your unofficial advisor for years." The conversation ended there, but it returned in different forms. Drew began using "we" when discussing my company's future. He started attending my staff meetings, sitting silently in the corner, making notes. My team grew uncomfortable, exchanging glances when he offered unsolicited input. 6 months before our 7th anniversary, PixelPerfect landed our biggest client yet, a major athletic apparel company headquartered in Portland. The contract would double our annual revenue and put us on the map nationally. The night I signed the deal, Drew opened an expensive bottle of wine. "We did it, babe," he said, raising his glass. The "we" grated on me, but I let it slide. This was my moment of triumph after nearly a decade of hustle. I wouldn't let anything diminish it. 3. Months later, Drew quit his job. He didn't discuss it with me beforehand, just came home one evening and announced he'd resigned effective immediately. "I want to be more involved in what we're building together," he said, as if this were a joint decision we'd reached. PixelPerfect needs someone focused on growth strategy and business development. You're brilliant at design, but you need a counterpart for the business aspects. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When I reminded him that I had successfully built the company from nothing to a multi-million-dollar agency without his daily involvement, his expression cooled. And imagine how much further along you'd be if you'd had proper business guidance from the beginning. That began the most stressful period of our marriage. Drew started showing up at my office daily, setting up camp in our small conference room, summoning my employees for strategy sessions that I wasn't invited to. He contacted my clients directly, introducing himself as representing PixelPerfect. When I confronted him, the arguments escalated. "I'm your husband," he'd counter whenever I pointed out that he had no official role at my company. "Everything. We build together. That's marriage." I reminded him of our prenuptial agreement. He dismissed it with a wave. "That was before I understood the potential of what you were creating. Things change." By the time our 7th anniversary approached, the tension had become unbearable. My team was confused about the chain of command. Clients were receiving mixed messages. I was losing sleep, second-guessing decisions, feeling cornered in the company I had built from nothing. When Drew suggested we celebrate our anniversary at Corsica, Portland's most exclusive restaurant, where reservations required connections or months of waiting, I agreed, hoping a public setting might keep the peace for one evening. I was wrong. "I want my name on the paperwork, Jessica." Drew's demand hung in the air between us, along with the unspoken threat behind his words. The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. 7 years of partnership, of building a life together, had come down to this power play disguised as an anniversary dinner. I thought about the journey, from that design conference meet cute to this moment of ultimatum. Had I missed the signs along the way? Or had they been there all along, and I'd chosen not to see them? "The business is mine, Drew. We have a legal agreement that states that clearly." I kept my voice level, though my heart was racing. "You've always known how important PixelPerfect is to me. It's the reason we got a prenup in the first place." Drew's jaw tightened. "That was 7 years ago, when your company was nothing but a dream and a laptop. I've invested in this marriage, in supporting your career. I've made sacrifices. I quit my job to help you grow the business. I deserve recognition for that contribution." "You quit your job without discussing it with me," I reminded him. "That was your choice, not a mutual decision. And while I appreciate your support over the years, PixelPerfect was profitable and award-winning before you decided to insert yourself into daily operations." Drew leaned back, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You know," he said finally, "I always admired your ambition. It's what attracted me to you in the first place. But I never expected it to come between us like this." He took a sip of his champagne. "I'm not asking for control, Jessica. Just partnership. Recognition of my role in your success." I thought about the countless nights I'd worked while he slept soundly, the risks I'd taken, the creative vision I'd developed and defended. Yes, he'd been supportive. But support isn't the same as creation. "Drew, I value what we've built together as a couple, but PixelPerfect is my company, my name, my vision, my responsibility." His expression darkened. "Then maybe we need to reconsider what we're building as a couple." The threat was unmistakable. "Because I'm not content being just the husband anymore. Not when half of what you've created during our marriage is legally mine anyway. Prenup or not." I felt a chill at his words. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you don't voluntarily add me to the company as an equal partner, I'll pursue other options." He lowered his voice. "My family's lawyers have been reviewing the situation. There are ways to challenge prenuptial agreements, especially when one party's contributions to the other's success can be demonstrated. And I have 7 years of evidence, Jessica. The waiter returned with our appetizers. His timing as terrible as his attempt at invisibility was obvious. Drew smiled broadly, thanking him as if we were having the most pleasant anniversary dinner imaginable. When we were alone again, he continued in a near whisper. I don't want it to come to that. I'd rather you recognize what's fair without legal battles that would damage the company's reputation and our personal lives. I picked up my water glass, needing something to do with my trembling hands. This isn't fair, Drew. You're using our anniversary to blackmail me. He had the audacity to look wounded. I'm trying to have an honest conversation about our future. The timing may not be ideal, but we've been dancing around this for months. I need you to take me seriously. He reached across the table for my hand. I pulled away. Think about it logically. If we divorced tomorrow, I'd be entitled to half of everything anyway. I'm offering a path where we stay together, strengthen our partnership, and avoid messy legal complications. That's not how the prenup works, and you know it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My company is protected. It's not a marital asset. Drew's smile was condescending. Prenups get challenged successfully all the time, especially after long marriages. And do you really want to test it? The publicity alone would cost you clients. He took another sip of champagne. Plus, there's the matter of the lifestyle clause. My stomach dropped. The lifestyle clause had been his lawyer's addition, supposedly to protect both of us from bad behavior that might damage our reputations or finances. At the time, it had seemed like standard legalese. Now, I wondered what he was implying. What about it? I asked cautiously. Let's just say I've been keeping careful records of certain inconsistencies in your behavior over the past year. Times when you were supposedly working late but weren't at the office. Unexplained expenses. Communications that raise questions. His expression was neutral, but his meaning was clear. It would be unfortunate if those came to light during legal proceedings. My mind raced, trying to make sense of his insinuations. There was nothing to find, no affairs, no secret accounts, nothing that would trigger the lifestyle clause. But Drew's confident tone suggested he'd manufactured something, or was willing to. The thought made me physically ill. You'd really go that far? Make up lies about me to get what you want? I'd prefer not to, he said smoothly, which is why I'm giving you the opportunity to resolve this amicably. Add me to the company as an equal partner, publicly, legally, completely. We move forward together, personally and professionally. Everyone wins. He glanced at his watch. You don't need to decide this minute. Enjoy your anniversary dinner. But I'll need your answer. By the end of the weekend, I looked at my husband of 7 years, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. The charisma I'd found so attractive now seemed manipulative. The confidence I'd admired now read as entitlement. The support he'd offered had strings I hadn't recognized until he started pulling them. I need some air, I said, pushing back from the table. Drew started to rise. Alone, I added firmly. He hesitated, then nodded, sinking back into his chair with a look of practiced patience, as if indulging a child's tantrum. I grabbed my purse and headed for the restaurant's entrance, brushing past the maitre d' with a mumbled apology. Outside, the cool Portland evening air hit my face, bringing momentary clarity. Traffic moved along the street, pedestrians strolled past restaurants and bars. Life continued normally while my world tilted on its axis. I leaned against the building's brick facade, taking deep breaths, trying to process what had just happened. After a few minutes, I pulled out my phone and did something I probably should have done years ago. I called Karen Bennett. Karen had been my first design professor in college, later becoming a mentor and friend. She'd cautioned me about rushing into marriage with Drew, sensing something in him that my love-blinded eyes couldn't see. We'd grown distant after I dismissed her concerns, but she was the only person I could think of who might understand my situation without judgment. Jessica? Her voice was warm with surprise when she answered. It's been ages. Everything okay? Not really, I admitted, fighting back tears. I need advice from someone who won't say, I told you so, even though they'd be justified. Karen's laugh was gentle. Then you've called the right person. What's happening? I gave her the condensed version. Drew's increasing involvement in my company, his ultimatum, his threats about the prenup. With each word, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I'd been carrying this tension alone for so long, convinced I could handle it without outside help. Where are you right now? Karen asked when I finished. Outside Corsica. We were having our anniversary dinner when he dropped this on me. Classy timing, she said dryly. Listen, do you remember Tom Wilson from your graduating class? The one who went into contract law? Vaguely, I said, recalling a serious guy who double majored in design and pre-law. He specializes in creative business protection now, works with a lot of independent agencies and studios. You need to talk to him. Not Monday, not tomorrow, tonight. I'll text you his number. It's nearly 9 on a Friday, I protested. Trust me, call him. Tell him I sent you and it's urgent. And Jessica? Her voice softened. Whatever you decide. About your marriage, don't give up any part of your company. That's your life's work. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with Karen's text containing Tom's contact information. I hesitated for only a moment before dialing. To my surprise, he answered. On the third ring, Tom Wilson. Hi, Tom. I'm Jessica Taylor from PixelPerfect Design. Karen Bennett suggested I call you. I'm sorry for the late hour, but she said it was urgent. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Jessica Taylor? I've followed your work for years. That campaign you did for Cascade Brewery was brilliant. His tone was professional but friendly. If Karen says it's urgent, I believe her. What can I help with? Standing on a Portland sidewalk outside the restaurant where my husband waited, I explained my situation to a near stranger. Tom listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions about the prenup's specific language or Drew's exact words. Here's what you need to know, he said finally. Your prenup sounds solid, especially regarding the business. If it explicitly states that PixelPerfect remains your sole property regardless of the marriage's duration, that's significant protection. The lifestyle clause is concerning, though. Those can be problematic if broadly written. What should I do? I asked, watching through the restaurant window as Drew charmed our server, playing the role of abandoned but patient husband. Don't make any decisions tonight. Don't sign anything. Tell your husband you need time to consider his proposal. Tom's voice was calm but firm. And stop by my office tomorrow morning at 9. Bring your prenup. We'll review it together and discuss options. Thank you, I said, relief washing over me at having a concrete next step. I really appreciate this. One more thing, Jessica, Tom added before hanging up. Start documenting everything. Conversations, emails, text messages, anything related to this situation. And if you have any personal items you couldn't bear to lose, consider moving them to a secure location, just as a precaution. His words sent a chill through me. This wasn't just a disagreement between spouses anymore. It was a potential legal battle. And Drew had already shown he was willing to play dirty. I took a final deep breath and returned to our table. Drew looked up with calculated concern. Everything okay? Fine, I said, picking up my napkin. Just needed some air. And have you had time to think about our discussion? His tone was light, as if we'd been debating vacation destinations rather than the future of my company and our marriage. I met his gaze steadily. I have, and you're right that this deserves serious consideration. I'd like the weekend to think it through properly. Something like triumph flickered in his eyes. He interpreted my response as wavering, as the beginning of surrender. "That's reasonable," he said, signaling for the waiter to bring our entrees. "Let's enjoy our anniversary dinner and put business aside for now." We finished the meal in a parody of normalcy, making small talk about mutual friends and upcoming social events. Drew ordered dessert and another bottle of wine, seemingly content with what he perceived as progress. I played along, all the while thinking about Tom Wilson's advice and the meeting scheduled for the next morning. As Drew drove us home, he reached across the console to take my hand. "I know tonight was difficult," he said, his voice gentle. "But you'll see, this is the right move for both of us. Together, we can take Pixel Perfect to heights you haven't even imagined." I nodded non-committally, gazing out at the Portland skyline. The city lights blurred slightly as tears threatened. 7 years of marriage, coming down to this. Ultimatums, and legal strategies, manufactured evidence and thinly veiled threats. I thought about the prenuptial agreement, locked in our home safe. I needed to retrieve it tonight before meeting with Tom tomorrow. And I needed to decide how much I was willing to fight for what I'd built. Drew mistook my silence for acceptance. "I've always believed in you, Jessica," he continued, his voice smooth as the luxury car's engine. "From that first night in Seattle, I knew you were special. This is just the next chapter in our story." I wondered if he actually believed that, or if it was just another carefully crafted line. Had anything in our relationship been genuine? Or had I been a long-term investment for him, one that was finally ready to pay dividends? As we pulled into our condo's parking garage, Drew squeezed my hand. "Happy anniversary, babe. Here's to many more." The irony wasn't lost on me. This might be our last anniversary if I refused his demands. But for the first time since leaving the restaurant, I felt a flicker of something beyond fear and betrayal. It was resolve. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't surrender the company I'd built with my own creativity, determination, and sleepless nights. Drew might have been planning this move for years, gradually positioning himself to claim what wasn't his. But I had something he didn't expect. The prenup he'd so casually dismissed, the mentors and friends I'd kept at a distance during our marriage, and the strength that had allowed me to build Pixel Perfect from nothing. As we rode the elevator to our penthouse unit, Drew draped his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "Of us. We're going to be unstoppable together." I leaned into him one last time, playing the role of the wife he thought he knew, while my mind raced ahead to tomorrow's meeting with Tom Wilson. Drew had made his move. Now it was my turn. I barely slept that night, lying next to Drew in our king-sized bed, listening to his even breathing while my mind raced. The bedside clock glowed 3:17 a.m. when I finally gave up, carefully sliding out from under the covers. Drew stirred slightly, but didn't wake. I padded silently across the plush carpet to our walk-in closet, closing the door before turning on the light. At the back, behind winter coats and formal wear, was our wall safe, a wedding gift from Drew's parents, ironically enough. I dialed the combination with practiced fingers, wincing at each audible click in the quiet apartment. Inside were passports, birth certificates, insurance policies, and the document I sought, our prenuptial agreement, bound in a leather portfolio with the law firm's embossed logo. I took it to the guest bathroom, the farthest point from our bedroom, and closed the door before turning on the light. Sitting on the edge of the marble tub, I opened the portfolio and began reading the legal language I'd last reviewed 7 years ago. The business protection clause was there, exactly as I remembered. Any business owned by either party prior to the marriage, including PixelPerfect Design, shall remain the sole property of said party regardless of the marriage's duration or dissolution. There was additional language about business assets acquired during the marriage, expansion of existing businesses, and intellectual property. I flipped to the section on the lifestyle clause, the one Drew had threatened to leverage against me. Reading it now, I noticed something I'd overlooked before. The clause was mutual. It protected both parties from significant changes in behavior, breaches of trust, or actions that could damage the reputation or financial standing of either spouse. If Drew manufactured evidence against me, wouldn't the same clause apply to his false accusations? I made a mental note to ask Tom about this in the morning. What caught my attention most, however, was a section near the end titled Procedural Safeguards. It outlined steps to be taken in the event that either party felt pressured to modify the agreement due to coercion or duress. One provision specifically addressed business ownership. If at any time during the marriage, Party A attempts to force Party B to transfer ownership or control of a protected business through threats, manipulation, or coercion, Party B may activate safeguard procedures by contacting the designated attorney. My hands trembled slightly as I read further. The safeguard procedures included immediate legal representation, financial protection measures, and, most significantly, a penalty clause against the coercing party. If activated and verified, Drew could forfeit his claim to certain marital assets. I vaguely remembered my lawyer explaining this as a deterrent against exactly the kind of pressure Drew was now applying. But in the happy glow of pre-wedding planning, I hadn't imagined we'd ever need it. At the bottom of the page was contact information for the designated attorney, not Tom Wilson, but a Patricia Mendoza at a firm in downtown Portland. I took a photo of the page with my phone, then carefully returned the prenup to its exact position in the safe. After erasing any evidence of my nighttime research, I curled up in the guest room, finally falling into a fitful sleep around 5 a.m. Drew found me there when he woke, concern etched on his handsome face. "Everything okay? You never sleep in here." His hair was tousled, his expression still soft with sleep. For a moment, he looked like the man I'd fallen in love with, not the stranger who'd threatened me at dinner. "Couldn't sleep," I mumbled, rubbing my eyes. "Didn't want to disturb you with my tossing and turning." He sat on the edge of the bed, placing a warm hand on my shoulder. "About last night. I know I caught you off guard. Maybe I could have approached things differently." This wasn't quite an apology, I noticed. "How about we grab breakfast at Wildflower Cafe and talk through this calmly? No pressure, just discussion." The temptation to pretend everything was normal, to grasp at this momentary peace, was strong. But Tom Wilson was expecting me at 9, and I wouldn't miss that appointment for anything. "I have a meeting with a potential client this morning," I lied. "Rain check for lunch?" Drew's eyes narrowed slightly. "On Saturday? You didn't mention any Saturday meetings." "Last-minute thing. They're flying in from Chicago just for the day." The lies came easier than I expected. "We could do lunch after? Maybe that new place on Division Street?" He studied me for a moment longer before nodding. "Sure. Text me when you're done." He leaned down to kiss my forehead. "And Jess? I really do want what's best for us. Both of us." As soon as Drew left, for his regular Saturday morning tennis game, I showered and dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, casual enough for a weekend but professional enough for meeting an attorney. I grabbed my laptop, the photo of the prenup page, and my portfolio of PixelPerfect's recent work. The latter wasn't strictly necessary for a legal consultation, but I felt stronger carrying physical evidence of what I'd built. Tom Wilson's office was in a converted warehouse in the industrial district, the exposed brick and steel beams speaking to its manufacturing past. His practice occupied the top floor, with windows overlooking the Willamette River. Despite the wee, early weekend hour, he was waiting in the reception area when I arrived, coffee in hand. "Jessica Taylor," he said, extending his hand. "I've admired your work for years. That campaign for New Season's Market was brilliant, completely reimagined their brand identity while honoring their community roots." I blinked in surprise. "You follow design work?" "I represent creatives," he smiled, leading me to his office. "Understanding what you do is part of protecting why you do it." He gestured to a comfortable chair across from his desk. which I noticed was organized with careful precision. Now tell me everything from the beginning, not just last night's conversation, but the patterns leading up to it. For the next hour, I talked. I explained how Drew had gradually inserted himself into my business, how his support had morphed into control, how his quitting his job had been presented as a fait accompli rather than a discussion. Tom took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions but mostly listening with undivided attention. I brought the section of the prenup about the safeguard procedures, I said finally, showing him the photo on my phone. I'm wondering if this applies to my situation. Tom studied it, then reached for a legal pad. Based on what you've described, yes. Drew's actions, particularly his ultimatum and threats regarding the lifestyle clause, constitute coercion under this provision. He looked up. But before we activate this, I need to ask, what's your goal here? Are you looking to protect your company while preserving your marriage, or are you preparing for separation? The question hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, I hadn't fully processed the possibility that my marriage might be ending. I don't know, I admitted. 24 hours ago, I was getting ready for an anniversary dinner with my husband. Tom nodded sympathetically. That's completely understandable. The good news is, we don't have to decide that today. Our immediate priority is protecting PixelPerfect from any potential hostile action. He tapped his pen against the legal pad. Here's what I recommend. First, we contact Patricia Mendoza, the designated attorney in your prenup. Having continuity from the original agreement will strengthen your position. I've never met her, I confessed. Drew's family arranged the legal team for the prenup. I had my own lawyer review it, but Patricia's firm handled the drafting. That's not unusual, especially when there's a significant wealth disparity between partners. But it might actually work in your favor. She'll be familiar with the documents. Intent. He made a note. Second, we need to secure your business assets immediately. Does Drew have access to company accounts, contracts, client information, or intellectual property? I thought about it. He has keys to the office, and he knows the Wi-Fi password. But he doesn't have admin access to our servers or banking. I've kept those separate. Good, let's keep it that way. Change passwords where possible, and we'll talk to your IT team about additional security measures on Monday. He continued, making notes. Third, documentation. Start keeping detailed records of all interactions with Drew, especially anything related to the business. Save texts, emails, voicemails. If you have conversations in person, write them down afterward with as much detail as you can remember. It felt surreal, discussing my marriage in such clinical terms. This feels extreme, I said quietly, like I'm preparing for war with someone I love. Tom set down his pen. Jessica, I understand this is difficult, but based on what you've told me, Drew is already treating this as adversarial. He made threats. He suggested he had manufactured evidence against you. He gave you an ultimatum. His voice was gentle but firm. You're not escalating. You're protecting yourself against someone who's already escalated. Deep down, I knew he was right. The Drew who'd charmed me at that Seattle conference years ago seemed increasingly like a carefully constructed facade. The real Drew, the one who believed he was entitled to my company simply because he was my husband, had been revealing himself gradually over years, and unmistakably last night. What about this Patricia Mendoza? I asked. Should I call her today? Let me reach out first, Tom suggested, attorney to attorney. I'll explain the situation and see if she's available for a meeting Monday morning. In the meantime, he hesitated. I need to ask a personal question. Do you feel safe going home? Based on what you've described, Drew's behavior is controlling, but not physically threatening. However, if that changes, or if you're uncomfortable, we should discuss alternatives. The question caught me off guard. Did I feel unsafe with Drew? He'd never been physically aggressive, never even raised his voice substantially. His methods were subtler: charm, manipulation, implied threats. "I think I'm okay for now," I said slowly. "But I appreciate the concern." Tom nodded. "Trust your instincts. If anything changes, call me immediately, day or night." He handed me his card with his personal cell number written on the back. "For now, try to maintain normalcy. Don't confront Drew about the prenup or mention that you're seeking legal advice. The element of surprise is valuable here." I left Tom's office feeling strangely lighter. The situation remained dire, but I had a plan, professional support, and, most importantly, confirmation that I wasn't overreacting. Drew's behavior was problematic enough to warrant legal intervention. That validation alone was worth the consultation fee. Drew texted while I was driving away from Tom's office. "Tennis running long. How about we meet at home instead of lunch? I'll pick up food." I replied with a casual, "Sounds good. See you there." But my stomach knotted at the thought of facing him now, pretending everything was normal when I'd just set legal wheels in motion. Our condo was quiet when I arrived. I used the time alone to do what Tom had suggested: secure my digital life. I changed passwords on my personal email, cloud, storage, and social media accounts. I searched the condo for any business documents I might have brought home, gathering them to return to the office on Monday. I even checked my phone for tracking apps, though I found nothing suspicious. When Drew arrived an hour later, carrying bags from our favorite Thai restaurant, he moved with the easy confidence of someone who believed the battle was already won. "Productive meeting?" he asked, unpacking containers of pad thai and green curry. "Very," I replied truthfully. "This new client has an interesting vision. I think we'll be able to help them." At least that part wasn't a lie. Tom Wilson was, indeed, helping me with my vision for the future. Drew poured wine for both of us. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," he said, handing me a glass. I realized the timing wasn't ideal. Anniversary dinner should be about celebration, not business discussions. He raised his glass. "To us, and to better timing." I clinked my glass against his automatically, taking a small sip while wondering if this was a genuine attempt at reconciliation or just another tactical shift. "Better timing would be welcome," I said carefully. "That's why I thought we could set aside the weekend for us. No business talk, no company discussions, just husband and wife enjoying time together." His smile was warm, his eyes crinkled at the corners the way they did when he was being sincere, or at least when he wanted to appear sincere. Monday is soon enough to talk about PixelPerfect's future. Part of me wanted to accept this olive branch, to sink into the comfortable patterns of our marriage and pretend last night never happened. But Tom's words echoed in my head. Drew was treating this as adversarial. His sudden desire to postpone? The conversation wasn't consideration for my feelings. It was a strategic retreat. "That sounds nice," I lied, matching his smile with one of my own. "I could use a break from thinking about work." We spent the day in an elaborate charade of normalcy. We watched a documentary Drew had been wanting to see, took a walk along the riverfront, and prepared dinner together, activities we'd enjoyed during happier times in our marriage. Drew was attentive, charming, touching my arm or the small of my back whenever he passed by, as if physical connection could bridge the chasm that had opened between us. By evening, the constant performance had left me exhausted. When Drew suggested opening a bottle of the expensive Cabernet we'd been saving for a special occasion, I begged off, claiming a headache from too much screen time during the documentary. He looked disappointed but didn't press the issue, bringing me ibuprofen and water instead of wine. As I lay in bed that night, I wondered if this considerate version of Drew was another manipulation, or if some part of him truly cared for me, beyond what I could provide professionally. Sunday passed in similar fashion. Brunch at our favorite spot in the Pearl District, a gallery opening Drew had read about in the Oregonian, dinner with friends who commented on what a power couple we were. Through it all, Drew maintained the fiction that everything was perfect between us, and I played my part with growing weariness. Monday morning couldn't come quickly enough. I woke before dawn, claiming an early client call as excuse to leave, while Drew still slumbered. The city was peaceful at 6 a.m., streets empty except for delivery trucks and early commuters. I drove to my office, using the quiet hours to prepare for whatever the day might bring. The PixelPerfect offices were still, dark when I arrived, the open workspace filled with emptiness that would soon give way to the creative energy of my team. I walked through slowly, looking at the space I'd built. The custom desks designed to foster collaboration, the wall of awards we'd accumulated, the gallery of past client work that told the story of our growth. This was mine, created through vision and persistence. The thought of Drew claiming equal ownership made anger flare hot in my chest. My office occupied the corner, with glass walls offering views of both the workspace and the city beyond. I unlocked the door, settled at my desk, and powered up my computer. The email notification chimed almost immediately. A message from Tom Wilson, sent at 11 p.m. the previous night. Meeting confirmed with Patricia Mendoza, Monday 8:30 a.m., my office, bringing documentation. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by apprehension. In less than 3 hours, I would formally begin the process of activating the safeguard clause in my prenup. It felt momentous, irrevocable. I opened my design software and lost myself in creative work until it was time to leave for the meeting, finding comfort in the familiar patterns of visual problem-solving. Tom's office was already occupied when his assistant showed me in at 8:25. Patricia Mendoza was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd pictured someone similar to Drew's family lawyer, silver-haired, patrician, intimidating. Instead, she was a compact woman in her 40s with a direct gaze and no-nonsense demeanor. "Jessica Taylor," she said, rising to shake my hand firmly. "I've reviewed your prenuptial agreement thoroughly. I remember it well. Drafted it myself after the parameters were set by the Parker family representatives." There was the faintest hint of distaste in her voice when she mentioned Drew's family. "Tom has briefed me on the current situation. I understand your husband is attempting to force transfer of business ownership through coercion?" I nodded, momentarily unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Despite everything, saying it aloud made Drew's betrayal newly painful. Patricia's expression softened slightly. "I see this more often than you might expect. The supporting spouse decides they're entitled to the fruits of the creative spouse's labor." She gestured for me to sit. "The good news is that we anticipated this possibility when drafting the agreement. The safeguard clause was included specifically to protect parties from this kind of pressure." Tom, seated beside me, opened a folder. "We've documented the pattern of behavior leading to the ultimatum. At their anniversary dinner, Jessica has been meticulous about preserving texts and emails that demonstrate Drew's escalating attempts to insert himself into PixelPerfect." Patricia reviewed the materials, her expression neutral, but her eyes sharp. "This is good documentation. The threatening statements regarding the lifestyle clause are particularly relevant." She looked up at me. "To activate the safeguard provision, we need to formally notify Drew that his actions constitute coercion under the terms of the prenuptial agreement. This notification triggers a specific process. He'll have 14 days to cease all attempts to gain control of your company and to retract any threats made regarding manufactured evidence." "What happens if he doesn't?" I asked. "If he continues the coercive behavior after notification, the penalty clause takes effect. In your case, that means he forfeits his claim to 50% of the marital assets that would normally be divided in a divorce. He'd still receive some portion, but significantly less than he would otherwise be entitled to." Tom leaned forward. "It also establishes a pattern of behavior that would be valuable if litigation becomes necessary, either regarding the business or in divorce proceedings." The word divorce still caused a physical reaction, a tightening in my chest, a hollowness in my stomach. Despite everything, despite the legal meeting and documentation and strategies, some part of me still clung to the idea that this was salvageable, that the Drew I'd fallen in love with existed somewhere beneath the manipulative stranger who'd threatened me at Corsica. "Once we send this notification, there's no going back," Patricia cautioned, seeming to read my thoughts. "It formally acknowledges that your husband has violated the terms of your prenuptial agreement. Are you prepared for how he might react?" I thought about the past weekend, the careful performance of marital harmony, the strategic retreat from Friday's ultimatum. Drew believed he had the upper hand, that I would eventually capitulate to his demands rather than risk my marriage. He didn't expect me to fight back. He certainly didn't expect me to leverage the very legal document his family had insisted upon. "I'm prepared," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "How do we proceed?" The next 2 hours were a blur of legal strategy. Patricia drafted the formal notification, while Tom outlined contingency plans for various scenarios. Drew attempting to access company servers, Drew contacting clients directly, Drew trying to freeze marital assets. It was surreal mapping out defenses against someone I'd shared my life with for 7 years, but each precaution felt necessary given his recent behavior. "When would the notification be delivered?" I asked as our meeting wound down. "Ideally, as soon as possible," Patricia said. "I can have a courier deliver it to him today, either at your home or at another location." I considered this. "He's expecting me home for dinner. I'd rather not be present when he receives it." Tom nodded. "Understandable. We could have it delivered to your condo during business hours before you return home." That seemed cowardly, somehow letting Drew receive such significant news alone. Despite everything, I owed him the courtesy of facing him directly. But I also recognized the potential volatility of the situation. Could we compromise? Have it delivered while I'm present, but with some privacy safeguard in place. Patricia considered this. What about a public location? A restaurant or cafe? Having witnesses nearby might moderate his reaction. "He has a standing lunch meeting at Heartwood Cafe every Monday," I said, thinking aloud. "With his former colleagues from the venture capital firm. He'd be with people he respects professionally, which might keep things civil." Tom looked skeptical. "Are you comfortable with them witnessing this?" I wasn't. Not really. But the alternatives seemed worse. "It's better than at home, where we'd be completely alone, or at my office, where my team might be affected." In the end, we settled on the Heartwood delivery. Patricia arranged for a courier to arrive at 1:15 p.m., when Drew would likely be midway through lunch, but before the check would arrive. I provided Drew's physical description and confirmed I wouldn't contact him beforehand to prevent any chance of him canceling the meeting. As I left Tom's office, clutching a folder of copies and legal strategy documents, the reality of what I'd set in motion hit me fully. By this afternoon, Drew would know I was fighting back. Our marriage might not survive this, might not deserve to survive, given the manipulation I'd documented. The thought brought both grief and a strange sense of liberation. I texted Drew, a casual message about working late, and grabbed dinner with the team, adding that I'd see him at home later. He replied almost immediately, "Missing you. Bring home dessert from that place on Burnside?" So normal, so married, as if he hadn't threatened to destroy everything I'd built unless I handed him half of it. Back at the office, I called Karen, needing to hear a friendly voice. She answered on the first ring. "How did it go with Tom?" "We're activating the safeguard clause," I said, the words still feeling foreign in my mouth. "Drew gets formal notification today. Are you okay?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern, nearly broke me. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me keeps thinking this is all a misunderstanding, that if we just talked it through—" My voice trailed off. "That's normal," Karen said gently. "You're grieving the relationship you thought you had. But Jessica, listen to me. What Drew did goes beyond a disagreement or miscommunication. He tried to take something that belongs to you through threats and manipulation. That's not love. I knew she was right. The Drew who loved me, who believed in me, who encouraged my independence. That man would never have issued ultimatums or implied he had manufactured evidence against me. Whether that version of Drew had been real or just a carefully crafted persona, he was gone now. The man wearing his face was someone else entirely. What happens after the notification? Karen asked. He has 14 days to back off completely. No. More attempts to gain control of PixelPerfect. No more threats. If he complies, we could potentially move forward, maybe with counseling. Even as I said it, I knew how unlikely that scenario was. Drew's sense of entitlement ran too deep. If he doesn't comply, the penalty clause kicks in, and he loses a significant portion of marital assets in any divorce. Karen was silent for a moment. Do you want to stay somewhere else tonight? My guest room is always open. I'd considered it, but ultimately decided against running away. I need to face this head on, but thank you. Call me anytime, she insisted. Day or night. And Jessica, I'm proud of you. Standing up for yourself and your work takes real courage. After hanging up, I threw myself into design work, losing track of time until my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia at 1:22 p.m. Notification delivered. Courier reports recipient appeared shocked, but maintained composure. No verbal response. I stared at the message, imagining the scene. Drew at his regular table with former colleagues, the courier approaching with the legal envelope. The moment of recognition as he read the formal notification that his wife was invoking legal protection against him. What was he thinking now? Was he angry, hurt, calculating his next move? All three? The answer came at 2:17 p.m. when my office phone rang. My assistant's voice was unusually hesitant. Jessica, your husband is on line 1. He sounds upset. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and picked up the receiver. Drew. What the hell is this? His voice was tightly controlled, but I could hear the fury simmering beneath the surface. I'm having lunch with colleagues and suddenly I'm served with legal papers accusing me of coercion and threatening behavior? Are you out of your mind? You gave me an ultimatum, Drew. You threatened to manufacture evidence against me if I didn't add you to my company. What did you expect? I expected my wife to discuss concerns with me directly, not ambush me with lawyers. The veneer of control was slipping. Do you have any idea how this looks? What people will think? The fact that his first concern was appearance rather than our relationship spoke volumes. You should have thought about that before threatening me at our anniversary dinner. A brief silence. Then his voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. You've made a serious mistake, Jessica. I was trying to help you, to elevate your little company beyond what you could achieve alone. Now you've turned this into legal warfare. I heard him exhale sharply. I'll be staying at the Nines tonight. Don't wait up. He hung up before I could respond. I sat motionless, the receiver still in my hand, processing what had just happened. Drew's reaction confirmed everything Tom and Patricia had warned me about. He viewed my legal protection as an attack rather than a defense. There would be no easy resolution, no sudden realization of wrongdoing on his part. The battle lines were drawn. I replaced the receiver slowly, feeling a strange calm settle over me. The uncertainty was gone. Whatever came next, whether fighting to save my marriage or preparing for its end, I would face it with clear eyes and the knowledge that I had taken the first step toward protecting what I'd built. PixelPerfect was mine, and no amount of manipulation or legal maneuvering would change that. For the first time since Drew's ultimatum, I felt not just resolve but something approaching hope. This wasn't the end of my story, just the beginning of a new chapter. The 2 weeks following the delivery of the legal notification became a masterclass in emotional warfare. Drew returned from the Nines Hotel the next day, his anger replaced by a calculated charm offensive. He arrived with flowers, peonies, my favorite, and an expensive bottle of wine. "I overreacted," he said, standing in our kitchen with an expression of practiced contrition. "We should be able to discuss this as partners, not adversaries." His voice was soft, reasonable, the voice of the man I'd married. But his eyes remained cold, evaluating my response like a chess player anticipating his opponent's next move. I accepted the flowers with caution, placing them in water while maintaining emotional distance. "I agree that communication is important," I said carefully. But threatening me was never acceptable. Drew winced at the word threatening, as if I'd slapped him. "I never threatened you, Jess. I was frustrated and expressed myself poorly, but my intentions were good." He moved closer, his cologne, the one I'd given him last Christmas, enveloping me in familiar scent. "You've built something incredible with PixelPerfect. I just want to protect and expand what you've created." His words were perfect, his tone sincere. 6 months ago, I might have believed him completely. Now, with Tom and Patricia's warnings, fresh in my mind, I recognized the subtle manipulation, the reframing of his ultimatum as concern, the implication that I was overreacting, the strategic use of intimacy to disarm me. "I appreciate that," I said, stepping back slightly. "But I need space right now to think about everything." Drew's jaw tightened momentarily before he nodded with apparent understanding. "Of course. Space and time." He retreated to his home, office, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my thoughts and the faint scent of peonies mixing with his lingering cologne. That night established the pattern for the days that followed. Drew maintained a performance of perfect husbandly behavior. Cooking. Elaborate meals, inquiring about my day, respecting the physical distance I'd established by sleeping in the guest room. He didn't mention PixelPerfect, the prenup notification, or his previous demands. To an outside observer, he would have appeared thoughtful, patient, the model of a spouse giving their partner needed space during a difficult time. But there were moments when the mask slipped, when I'd catch him watching me with calculation rather than affection, when his phone would ping with messages he'd quickly hide, when his questions about my schedule seemed designed to track my movements rather than express interest in my life. During those moments, I knew with cold certainty that nothing had changed. Drew was waiting out the 14-day response period, playing the devoted husband while strategizing his next move. At the office, I worked with Tom Wilson to implement security protocols that would protect PixelPerfect from any potential sabotage. We changed security codes on the building entrances, updated server passwords, and instructed the reception staff to restrict Drew's previously unlimited access. My team noticed the changes, of course. The curious glances and whispered conversations didn't escape my attention, but I kept explanations minimal. A standard security upgrade, nothing to worry about. Lisa Murphy, my creative director and closest friend at PixelPerfect, wasn't so easily deflected. She cornered me in the supply closet on Thursday, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Jess, what's going on? First Drew starts showing up every day like he works here, then suddenly he's persona non grata and we're changing security protocols. Are you guys okay?" I hesitated, weighing how much to share. Lisa had been with PixelPerfect almost from the beginning, building the creative team from just herself to a department of 8 talented designers. She'd seen me through countless professional challenges, but discussing my marital issues felt like crossing a boundary. "Drew and I are working through some disagreements about the future of the company," I said finally. "It's complicated and personal, but I'm handling it." Lisa studied me, her artist's eye missing nothing. "Is that why you look like you haven't slept in days? Because you're handling it?" She lowered her voice. "If you need help, or just someone to talk to, I'm here. No judgment. The simple offer of support nearly broke me. I'd been so focused on the legal and business aspects of this crisis that I'd neglected the emotional toll it was taking. Thanks, I managed, blinking back unexpected tears. I might take you up on that soon, but right now I need to keep some separation between my personal issues and the company. Lisa nodded, respecting my boundaries even as her eyes reflected concern. Just remember you built a team, not just a company. We have your back, whatever's happening. Her words stayed with me throughout the day, a counterbalance to the isolation I'd been feeling. I'd been so afraid of Drew's interference affecting my team that I'd overlooked how much strength I might draw from the community I'd built at PixelPerfect. These were people who respected my vision, who'd chosen to join me in building something meaningful. Their loyalty wasn't to Drew or his connections. It was to the creative culture we'd developed together. That evening, I left work earlier than I had all week, stopping at a small boutique to purchase new pajamas and toiletries before checking into the Sentinel, a historic hotel downtown. I needed one night away from the emotional theater of my condo. One night without analyzing Drew's every expression and word for hidden meaning. I texted him a brief message. Working late, then drinks with clients. Don't wait up, and turned. Off my phone before he could reply. The hotel room was a sanctuary, simple but elegant with its high ceilings and vintage furnishings. I ordered room service, took a long bath in the clawfoot tub, and for the first time in days, slept deeply and dreamlessly. In the morning, I felt clearer, stronger, as if the physical distance from Drew had restored some essential part of me that had been draining away during our careful dance of pretense. Over breakfast in the hotel's cafe, I turned my phone back, on to find 17 missed calls and 23 text messages from Drew, escalating from casual concern to barely controlled panic as the night progressed. The final message, sent at 3:42 a.m., read simply, "Called hospitals, called police. Nothing. Please be safe." Guilt twisted in my stomach at the genuine worry in his words, followed immediately by indignation. I was an adult who had spent one night away without detailed explanation. His reaction seemed disproportionate, especially given our current tensions. I called him immediately, expecting anger. Instead, his voice was raw with relief. "Jess, thank God. Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm fine," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I stayed at a hotel last night. I needed some space to think." A long pause, then carefully, "A hotel? Alone?" The implication was clear, and it stung. "Yes, Drew, alone. I told you I was working late and having drinks." "Until 7 a.m. the next day? Without answering your phone? Without letting your husband know you're safe?" His relief was morphing into something else. Not quite anger, but a righteous indignation that made my defensive hackles rise. I turned my phone off. I needed one night without... I trailed off, not wanting to escalate the situation. "Without what, Jessica? Without your husband? Without accountability?" His voice had that dangerous quiet I'd come to recognize as calculated control. "Do you have any idea what I went through last night? I called Lisa, Karen, every hospital in Portland. I was about to file a missing person report." The mention of Lisa and Karen sent a jolt through me. "You called my friends and colleagues because I didn't come home one night? Drew, that's extreme." "Extreme?" Now the anger broke through. "Extreme is disappearing on your husband without a word. Extreme is turning off your phone during a difficult time in our marriage. Extreme is checking into a hotel alone when we have a perfectly good home." He took an audible breath, composing himself. "Where are you? I'll come get you." "No," I said firmly. "I'm having breakfast, then going to the office. I'll see you at home tonight." Before he could argue further, I added, "I'm sorry you were worried." That wasn't my intention. But I needed the space, and I stand by that decision. I ended the call before he could respond, my hands trembling slightly as I set the phone down. The conversation confirmed what I'd suspected. Drew's perfect husband routine had limits, and those limits had been reached. The mask had slipped, revealing the controlling nature beneath. The thought should have been disheartening, but instead, I felt strangely validated. This was the real Drew, the one who had issued ultimatums and threats, not the charming patient man he'd been pretending to be all week. When I arrived at the office, Lisa was waiting by my door, concern etched on her face. "Drew called me at midnight looking for you." He sounded frantic. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then made a decision. "Close the door," I said, dropping my bag on my desk. Once we had privacy, I gave her an edited version of recent events, Drew's growing interference in the company, his ultimatum about adding his name to PixelPerfect, my legal response. I omitted the details of the prenup and the lifestyle clause threats, keeping the focus on the professional aspects of the conflict rather than our marriage. Lisa listened without interruption, her expression shifting from concern to indignation. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. "Holy shit, Jess! I knew something was off when he started playing boss around here, but I had no idea it had gone this far." She leaned forward, her voice dropping despite our closed door. "What can I do to help?" The simple question brought unexpected relief. After days of carrying this burden alone, sharing even part of it felt like setting down a heavy weight. "Just knowing you understand helps more than you know," I said honestly. "And if you could keep an eye out for anything unusual, Drew contacting clients directly, trying to access company systems, asking team members for sensitive information, I'd appreciate the extra awareness." Lisa nodded firmly. "Consider it done. And Jess, I've got your back. So does the rest of the team. We're here because of your vision, not because of Drew's connections or charm." Her loyalty steadied me, reminding me of what was truly at stake in this conflict. PixelPerfect wasn't just my company. It was a community of talented people who believed in my leadership. Drew might claim he deserved credit for its success, but the reality was visible in Lisa's unwavering support and in the creative energy that filled our office space. I had built this, and I would protect it, no matter what personal cost I had to bear. The day passed in a blur of client meetings and creative reviews, my professional focus returning with surprising strength. By closing time, I felt more like myself than I had since Drew's ultimatum at Corsica. I was considering calling Karen to share the latest developments when my office phone rang. My assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Patricia Mendoza on line 1 for you." Patricia wasted no time with pleasantries. "We have a situation, Jessica. Your husband just left my office after attempting to dispute the coercion notification." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "He came prepared, very prepared. He had documentation suggesting that you had agreed in principle to making him a partner in PixelPerfect months ago, that the anniversary dinner conversation was merely formalizing something you'd already discussed extensively." Her voice was measured, professional, but I could hear the underlying concern. "He had emails, text messages, and what appeared to be notes from your private conversations." "That's impossible," I said, my mind racing. "I never agreed to any such thing, in principle or otherwise. The texts and emails must be taken out of context or—" A cold realization hit me. "Or fabricated entirely." "That's my suspicion as well," Patricia agreed. "But they're convincing at first glance." He also implied that your recent behavior, staying at a hotel last night, for example, indicates some personal instability that might be relevant to your business judgment. The calculated precision of Drew's attack took my breath away. He'd used my one night of self-care against me, framing it as emotional instability. And the fabricated evidence suggested he'd been planning this for longer than I'd realized. "What does this mean for the safeguard process?" "It complicates things," Patricia admitted. "The safeguard clause is predicated on clear coercion. If Drew can muddy the waters with evidence, even manufactured evidence, that you had previously agreed to his partnership. It creates doubt about whether his request constitutes coercion or simply the formalization of an existing agreement. Anger flared, hot and clarifying. So he can just lie, create fake evidence, and undermine a legal protection specifically designed for this situation? Not necessarily, Patricia said. His claims need verification. I've advised him that we'll need to authenticate any evidence he's presented, including metadata analysis of the digital communications. That buys us some time. She paused. However, I'm concerned about his next moves. This level of preparation suggests he's not going to back down within the 14-day window. I thought about Drew's performance over the past week, the perfect husband act, the strategic patience, the calculated concern. He'd been planning this counter move all along, gathering or creating evidence while pretending to respect my need for space. What do you recommend? Meet me and Tom tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m. Bring any communications between you and Drew regarding PixelPerfect, especially anything that might have been taken out of context. We need to review everything and prepare a formal response. Her voice softened slightly. And Jessica? Be careful tonight. Don't confront him about this visit to my office unless he brings it up first. We want to see what he's willing to reveal voluntarily. After hanging up, I sat motionless at my desk, processing this new development. The scale of Drew's deception was breathtaking. He'd not only threatened me at our anniversary dinner, but had apparently been laying groundwork for a legal counteroffensive for some time. The loving husband I thought I knew seemed increasingly like a carefully constructed facade, designed to advance his own interests at any cost. I gathered my things slowly, dreading the return to our condo. The thought of facing Drew after learning about his visit to Patricia, of maintaining a neutral expression while knowing he was actively working to undermine me, felt overwhelming. For a moment, I considered checking back into the Sentinel, avoiding the confrontation entirely, but that would only provide more ammunition for his claims about my instability. The drive home gave me time to compose myself, to prepare for whatever version of Drew awaited me. The charm offensive, the concerned husband, or perhaps now the righteous accuser. I rehearsed responses in my mind, determined to reveal nothing. About my conversation with Patricia while gathering any information he might voluntarily provide. Our condo was filled with the aroma of cooking when I arrived, something with garlic and wine that would normally have made my mouth water. Drew emerged from the kitchen in an apron, wooden spoon in hand, the very picture of domestic contentment. "You're home," he said, his smile warming his eyes in a way that seemed genuinely affectionate. "Just in time. Dinner's almost ready." I set my bag down slowly, studying him. There was no hint of a man who had spent his day attempting to legally outmaneuver his wife. No trace of the anger from our morning phone call. This was Drew at his most charming, his most disarming. "Smells delicious," I said, matching his casual tone. "What are we having?" "Coq au vin," he replied, returning to the kitchen with me following cautiously. "Your favorite. I thought after the stress of last night we could use a good meal and maybe a real conversation." He stirred the fragrant mixture, then turned to face me, his expression open and earnest. "I overreacted this morning. You're an adult, you needed space, and I should have respected that instead of calling everyone we know." The apology seemed sincere, which only heightened my sense of disorientation. How could the same man who had been carefully building a case against me all week now stand in our kitchen, apologizing with apparent genuineness? "Thank you for understanding," I said carefully. "It was just one night. I needed to clear my head." Drew nodded, turning back to the stove. "I get it. This has been hard on both of us." He glanced over his shoulder, his expression thoughtful. "I've been doing some thinking today about PixelPerfect and us, about how we move forward." Here it comes, I thought, bracing myself for whatever new angle he'd developed. "Oh?" Yeah. He plated the chicken dish with practiced precision, adding a sprig of thyme for presentation. I think I approached this all wrong. Making demands, getting lawyers involved. That's not how partners should handle things. He carried our plates to the dining table, which I now noticed had been set with our best dishes and tall candles. What I should have done was ask what role you envision for me in PixelPerfect's future, if any. What would make you comfortable? The strategic retreat was masterful, softening his position while maintaining his underlying goal, appearing reasonable and collaborative rather than demanding. If I hadn't known about his visit to Patricia, I might have been tempted to believe this change of heart was genuine. That's a different approach, I acknowledged, taking my seat across from him. Drew poured wine for both of us, his movements graceful and confident. I realized something today. PixelPerfect is your creation, your vision. I've been so focused on what I think I deserve that I haven't fully recognized what you've built. He raised his glass in a toast. To your incredible achievement, and to finding a path forward that honors that. I clinked my glass against his, automatically, taking a small sip while my mind raced. Was this just another performance? Or had my legal response genuinely caused him to reconsider his approach? Either way, I needed to be careful. I appreciate that, Drew. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge PixelPerfect as my creation. Dinner proceeded with surprising pleasantness, Drew asking thoughtful questions about current projects and sharing amusing anecdotes from his tennis group. He didn't mention his visit to Patricia or directly reference the prenup notification. Instead, he created an atmosphere of normalcy so convincing that I found myself relaxing despite my better judgment, laughing at his stories and momentarily forgetting the legal chess match unfolding between us. It wasn't until dessert, chocolate soufflé from my favorite patisserie, that he circled back to the subject of PixelPerfect. I've been thinking about alternative ways I could contribute to the company without formal partnership, he said, casually, as if this were simply an extension of our comfortable dinner conversation, maybe as a consultant on business strategy, or helping with investor relations, something that leverages my background without changing the ownership structure you've established. The offer sounded reasonable on the surface, a compromise that acknowledged my concerns while still giving him an official role. But after his visit to Patricia, I recognized it for what it was, a tactical adjustment rather than a genuine concession. That's something to consider, I said noncommittally. Though right now, with everything that's happened, I think some professional distance might be healthier. Drew's expression remained pleasant, but I caught the flash of calculation in his eyes before he nodded understanding. Of course, no rush on any decisions. He took a deliberate bite of soufflé, then added casually, by the way, I ran into Patricia Mendoza today, at Stumptown Coffee, of all places. The lie was delivered with such easy confidence that if Patricia hadn't called me, I might have believed it completely. Really? What a coincidence. Small world, Drew agreed, watching me over the rim of his wine glass. She mentioned she was the attorney who drafted our prenup. Nice woman, very professional. He set down his glass carefully. She seemed surprised to see me, said something about expecting to communicate through counsel. He was fishing, trying to determine how much I knew about his visit. I kept my expression neutral. Well, the notification did come from her office. It would be the standard procedure. Drew studied me for a moment longer, then nodded slightly, as if confirming something to himself. Right, of course. He pushed back from the table, gathering our dessert plates with practiced hospitality. Coffee? No, thank you, I said, suddenly exhausted by the performance we were both maintaining. It's been a long day. I think I'll turn in early. He accepted this without protest, placing a light kiss on my forehead as I stood. Sleep well. And Jess? I meant what I said. I want us to find a path forward that works for both of us. I managed a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Good night, Drew. In the guest room that had become my temporary sanctuary, I reviewed the day's events, trying to make sense of Drew's strategy. His visit to Patricia had been a direct legal countermove, yet his behavior at home suggested he was still trying to win me over through charm and apparent reasonableness. Was he hedging his bets, pursuing multiple approaches simultaneously? Or was the legal maneuver simply a backup plan if his personal persuasion failed? Either way, his actions revealed a calculated determination that unsettled me deeply. The man I married, or thought I married, would have been incapable of such seamless deception. He would have been genuinely hurt by my withdrawal, genuinely concerned when I didn't come home. This Drew, who could fabricate evidence and lie about coincidentally meeting my attorney while cooking my favorite meal and inquiring about my day with apparent sincerity, was someone I didn't recognize at all. I set my alarm for 6 a.m., determined to leave the condo before Drew woke. Tomorrow's meeting with Patricia and Tom would be crucial. We needed to counter Drew's fabricated evidence before it could undermine the safeguard process. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized that regardless of the legal outcome, something fundamental had shifted in my perception of my marriage. The trust that had been fraying for months had finally, irrevocably broken. Whether we could rebuild from here seemed increasingly doubtful, regardless of what happened with PixelPerfect. Morning arrived with gray drizzle, typical Portland weather that matched my subdued mood. I dressed quietly in the semi-darkness, choosing a structured blazer and tailored pants that made me feel armored for the day ahead. Drew was still asleep when I slipped out, leaving a brief note about an early client meeting to explain my absence. Patricia's office was already illuminated when I arrived. The senior attorney bent over documents spread across her conference table. Tom Wilson arrived moments later, carrying a cardboard tray with 3 coffee cups. "Thought we could use the reinforcements," he said, distributing the drinks. "Patricia's been filling me in. Your husband's been busy." Patricia gestured to the papers before her. Drew provided copies of everything he showed me yesterday. Emails, texts, handwritten notes allegedly documenting your verbal agreements. She slid several pages toward me. "Take a look and tell me if any of this is authentic." I scanned the documents with growing disbelief. There were screenshots of text conversations that had never happened, emails with my signature block but words I'd never written, and notes, in what appeared to be my handwriting, discussing partnership terms I'd never considered. "None of this is real," I said, my voice steady despite the shock. "The emails use my professional signature, but I never wrote these messages. And these handwritten notes, they look like my writing, but I never wrote this content." Tom examined one of the handwritten pages. "Good forgery. Similar enough to convince someone who isn't looking closely." He set it down with controlled anger. "This crosses a line, Jessica. Fabricating evidence isn't just an aggressive legal strategy, it's potentially criminal." Patricia nodded grimly. "Fraudulent evidence in a legal proceeding is serious. But proving that these are forgeries will require technical expertise, forensic analysis of the digital communications, handwriting experts for the notes." She gathered the papers into a neat stack. "That takes time and money, which I suspect is part of Drew's strategy. He's creating complications, dragging out the process, hoping you'll decide partnership is easier than this protracted battle." "So he's trying to run out the clock on the 14-day response period," I said, understanding dawning. "If we're still analyzing his evidence when the period expires, the safeguard activation is in limbo." Tom's expression was grim. "Exactly. And in the meantime, he continues his charm offensive at home, presenting himself as the reasonable spouse seeking compromise while you're the one escalating with legal measures." He took a sip of his coffee, thinking, "We need to change the dynamic. Instead of playing defense against his forgeries, we need to go on offense." Patricia leaned forward, interest piqued. "What are you thinking?" "The lifestyle clause in their prenup. The one Drew threatened to leverage against Jessica. It works both ways. Tom turned to me. Creating fraudulent evidence to seize control of your company could easily be construed as behavior that damages the reputation or financially standing of a spouse. What if we trigger the lifestyle clause against him, based on his fabrications? A slow smile spread across Patricia's face. Counter notification. Clever. She made a quick note. We'd need to document the forgeries conclusively, but even initiating. The process shifts the narrative. Instead of Jessica defending against his claims, he's defending against serious allegations of fraud. The strategy appealed to me on multiple levels. It was proactive rather than reactive, and it used Drew's own tactics against him. But a persistent doubt nagged at me. If we go this route, it feels like we're closing the door on any possibility of reconciliation, I said quietly. Escalating to fraud allegations seems final. Tom and Patricia exchanged glances, a wordless communication between legal colleagues. Then Tom leaned forward, his expression gentle but serious. Jessica, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. After everything that's happened, the ultimatum, the threats, now these forgeries, do you genuinely believe reconciliation is possible or desirable? The question landed like a physical weight. I'd been so focused on protecting PixelPerfect that I hadn't fully processed what Drew's actions meant for our marriage. The man who had threatened me, who had fabricated evidence against me, who had simultaneously tried to charm me while undermining me legally. Was that someone I could ever trust again? Someone I wanted to build a life with? No, I said finally, the word both painful and liberating. I don't think reconciliation is possible. Not anymore. Patricia nodded, as if my answer confirmed something she'd already suspected. Then we proceed with the counter-notification regarding the forged evidence. And Jessica, her voice softened slightly. You might want to consider whether it's wise to continue living with Drew during this process. With tensions escalating, having separate residences could provide clarity and safety for both of you. The suggestion of moving out made the situation suddenly, undeniably real. This wasn't just a legal strategy session, it was the beginning of the end of my marriage. The thought brought a complex wave of emotions, grief for what was lost, fear of the unknown future, but also a surprising sense of relief that the pretense was finally over. Whatever happened next, I would face it with clear eyes and honest intentions, something Drew had proven himself incapable of. I'll start looking for a temporary place today, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. And I'll need to prepare my team at PixelPerfect. If things get as contentious as I expect, they should be ready. Tom and Patricia outlined next steps: forensic, analysis of the forged documents, preparation of the counter-notification, security measures for both my personal and business accounts. As the meeting concluded, I felt a strange calm settling over me. The path ahead would be difficult, possibly ugly, but it was clear. Drew had shown his true colors, and in doing so had freed me from the lingering doubt and guilt that had clouded my judgment. Walking to my car in the light morning rain, I felt different, stronger, more certain. Drew had intended to take something from me through manipulation and deceit. Instead, he had inadvertently given me something invaluable: the clarity to see both him and myself more truthfully than ever before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them not as Drew Parker's wife, but as Jessica Taylor, founder and owner of PixelPerfect Design, and the architect of my own future. Finding an apartment in Portland's tight rental market proved more challenging than expected. After 3 days of viewings, all conducted during lunch breaks or early mornings to avoid arousing Drew's suspicion, I finally secured a furnished one-bedroom in the Pearl District, 6 blocks from PixelPerfect's offices. The apartment was modern but soulless, all chrome and gray with none of the character that had drawn me to our condo. Still, it offered what I needed most: security, 24-hour doorman and key fob access, proximity to work, and most importantly, distance from Drew's increasingly suffocating presence. The forensic analysis of Drew's forged documents was progressing, but slowly. The digital expert Patricia hired needed time to examine metadata on the emails and text messages, while the handwriting analyst required original samples of my writing for comparison with the forgeries. Meanwhile, the 14-day response period for the original safeguard notification was rapidly approaching its conclusion, with Drew showing no signs of backing down from his attempts to claim partial ownership of PixelPerfect. At home, the charade continued. Drew maintained his performance as the patient, supportive husband, never mentioning his legal maneuvers or the forged documents. Each evening brought some new gesture of apparent reconciliation, tickets to a gallery opening I'd mentioned wanting. To attend months ago, a rare first edition of my favorite design book found by chance at Powell's, a playlist of songs from our early dating days queued up on the sound system when I arrived home. The calculated precision of his emotional campaign was almost admirable if it hadn't been so manipulative. I hadn't yet told him about the apartment. The lease was signed, the first month's rent and security deposit paid, but I'd delayed moving any belongings, uncertain about the right timing for such a definitive step. The decision was made for me on Thursday morning, 10 days after the initial legal notification, when Lisa called me into an emergency meeting at the office. "We've got a situation," she said, closing my office door and lowering her voice. "Paul Jones from Evergreen Sportswear called me directly this morning. Said he received an email from Drew yesterday inviting him to discuss the future direction of their account with PixelPerfect. Paul was confused because they've been happy with our work and they've only ever dealt with our team, never with Drew." Evergreen was our second largest client, a regional athletic wear company whose rebranding had won us an industry award last year. "Did Paul forward you the email?" I asked, already reaching for my phone to call Tom. Lisa nodded, pulling up the message on her tablet. "That's not all. Melissa from accounting stopped by my office first thing today. Apparently, Drew called her yesterday asking for access to our financial management system to prepare for a presentation to investors. When she told him she'd need authorization from you, he said it was a surprise he was planning with you and swore her to secrecy." My stomach dropped. Drew was making moves on multiple fronts, contacting clients directly and attempting to access our financial records. This wasn't just continued interference, it was escalation. "Has anyone else reported contact from Drew?" "Not yet, but I've asked the department heads to let me know if they hear anything unusual." Lisa's expression was a mixture of concern and controlled anger. "Jess, what's his endgame here? It's like he's trying to position himself as already being part of company leadership." "That's exactly what he's doing," I said, the pieces falling into place. "He's creating a paper trail of involvement with clients and company finances. If this goes to court, he can point to these interactions as evidence that he was already functioning as a de facto partner in the business, regardless of what the paperwork says. The strategy was as clever as it was underhanded. I need to call Tom right away. And Lisa? Thank you. Your awareness probably just saved us from a much bigger problem." After Lisa left, I called Tom, explaining Drew's latest moves. His response was immediate and unequivocal. "You need to move out today." This level of escalation suggests he's getting desperate, which makes the situation at home potentially volatile. "And we need to issue a formal communication to all PixelPerfect staff and clients clarifying that Drew has no official role or authority within the company." By noon, the communication was drafted, reviewed by both Tom and Patricia, and sent to all employees, with a modified version going to clients. It was professional and factual, stating simply that Drew Parker, spouse of founder Jessica Taylor, is not employed by or affiliated with PixelPerfect Design in any capacity. Any communications from Mr. Parker regarding company business should DICA Be directed to appropriate PixelPerfect team members. I knew the email would force Drew's hand, eliminating his ability to operate behind the scenes. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly he would respond. At 12:43 p.m., my cell phone lit up with his incoming call. I let it go to voicemail, following Tom's advice to avoid direct confrontation. The voicemail Drew left was chillingly calm. Jessica, I just received several concerned calls from people who got your rather public disavowal of me. Interesting timing, since I was planning to discuss a potential compromise with you tonight. I thought we were working through this privately, but apparently you've chosen a more aggressive approach. We'll talk when you get home. Don't be late. 30 seconds later, my assistant appeared at my door. Jessica? Your husband is on line 1. He says it's urgent. I declined that call too, asking my assistant to take messages from Drew but not put him through. The implied threat in his voicemail, "Don't be late," had solidified my decision. I wasn't going home tonight. I wasn't going home ever again. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity. I called Karen, who immediately offered to help me move essential belongings from the condo. Tom arranged for a security specialist to meet us there and change the locks on my new apartment after the property manager provided the keys. Lisa coordinated with our IT team to implement additional security protocols protecting company servers and client information. By 4 p.m., I had a plan in place that felt both necessary and surreal. I was literally fleeing my own home while my husband was at work. Karen arrived at the office at 4:30, her practical sedan parked in the visitor's spot. "Ready for Operation Extraction?" she asked with forced lightness, trying to ease the tension she must have seen on my face. I brought boxes in some of those, vacuum seal bags for clothes. We can be in and out in under an hour if we're efficient. I nodded, grateful for her matter-of-fact approach. Drew usually gets home around 6:30. That should give us enough time. I'd made a mental inventory of what I needed: personal documents, irreplaceable mementos, enough clothing and toiletries for a few weeks. Everything else could be dealt with later, through attorneys if necessary. The condo was silent when we arrived, the afternoon sun casting long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows that had once been a selling point, but now felt exposing. Karen got to work immediately, heading to the guest room with empty boxes while I went straight to the home office to retrieve important documents from the safe. The combination clicked open on my first try, my fingers steady despite the adrenaline, coursing through me. Inside were our passports, birth certificates, insurance policies, and investment information, neatly organized in labeled folders, a system I'd implemented early in our marriage. I removed only my documents, leaving Drew's untouched. The prenuptial agreement I took as well. Although Tom and Patricia had copies, this was the original signed document. Beneath the folders was a velvet pouch containing jewelry passed down from my grandmother. Pieces with sentimental rather than monetary value that I couldn't bear to lose in whatever battle might be coming. With the most crucial items secured, I moved methodically through the condo, gathering essentials with an efficiency born of focused urgency. Karen worked alongside me, asking practical questions. Winter clothes too, or just current season? Any particular books you need, or can those wait? That helped me prioritize without becoming overwhelmed by the enormity of what I was doing. We were nearly finished, the car loaded with boxes and bags, when the unmistakable sound of a key in the front door froze us both. Karen's eyes widened as she mouthed what I was thinking. Drew. It was only 5:45 p.m. He was home early. "Jessica?" His voice carried from the entryway, followed by footsteps. "Your assistant said you left the office early. I thought we could—" He stopped abruptly in the bedroom doorway, taking in the scene. Half-empty closet, Karen standing with a box of my toiletries, suitcase open on the bed. His expression shifted from surprise to anger to something carefully neutral in the span of seconds. "I see. You're leaving." The calm in his voice was more unsettling than shouting would have been. I straightened, facing him directly. "Yes, I've found an apartment. Given everything that's happening, I think it's best if we have separate living arrangements for now. Drew's gaze moved from me to Karen, then to the suitcase, cataloging the situation with the same calculating assessment I'd seen in business negotiations. And you didn't think this warranted a conversation? You're just disappearing when I'm not home? Like you did when you contacted our clients behind my back? Or tried to access company financials without authorization? The words came out, sharper than intended, my composure cracking under the pressure of this confrontation. After your voicemail today, I didn't feel a conversation would be productive. He stepped into the room, his movements deliberate, controlled. Karen shifted subtly, positioning herself between us with casual purpose. My voicemail said we needed to talk, which we do clearly. Instead, you're sneaking out with... He gestured dismissively toward Karen. Reinforcements to avoid facing me directly. I'm not avoiding you, Drew. I'm establishing boundaries that you've repeatedly ignored. I zipped the suitcase closed with finality. We can communicate through our attorneys going forward. A flash of genuine surprise crossed his face. Attorneys? For a temporary separation while we work through a business disagreement. He moved closer, his voice softening. Jess, come on. This is extreme. Whatever issues we have, we can resolve them together, like we always have. The sudden shift to conciliation was familiar, the same tactic he'd employed after the initial legal notification. But now I recognized it for what it was, another performance, another manipulation designed to make me question my own decisions. This isn't just a business disagreement, I said firmly. You've threatened me, created forged documents, contacted my clients without authorization, and attempted to access company finances behind my back. Those aren't the actions of someone interested in resolution. Drew's facade cracked slightly, a flicker of the calculating hardness I'd glimpsed at our anniversary dinner showing through. You've misinterpreted everything. The documents reflect conversations we've had. The client outreach was me trying to support your business during a difficult time. You're seeing threats where I've only offered partnership. He reached for my hand, which I pulled away. We built a life together, Jessica. Are you really willing to throw that away over a company? The question was designed to provoke guilt, to frame me as the unreasonable one prioritizing business over marriage. 6. Months ago, it might have worked. Now, with clear eyes and the support of friends and professionals who validated my concerns, I saw through the manipulation. You're the one who made this about the company, Drew. You're the one who gave me an ultimatum at our anniversary dinner. You're the one who said you'd manufacture evidence against me if I didn't give you what you wanted. Karen, who had remained silent during our exchange, picked up the suitcase from the bed. I'll take this down to the car, she said quietly, giving me a supportive glance as she slipped past Drew in the doorway. When we were alone, Drew's expression hardened. So that's it? 7 years of marriage, and you're walking out without even trying to fix things? I tried, I said softly. The moment you issued that ultimatum at Corsica, I tried to explain why your demand was unreasonable. You responded with threats. When I activated the safeguard clause, a legal protection, we both agreed to before marriage, you responded with forgeries and behind-the-scenes manipulation. At every turn, you've chosen escalation over resolution. He shook his head, his expression a perfect mixture of hurt and disbelief. You've completely mischaracterized everything. I never threatened you. I never forged anything. I've only ever tried to be your partner in every sense of the word. He sighed heavily. But clearly you've made up your mind, constructed a narrative where I'm the villain, and nothing I say will change that. The performance was impressive, wounded innocence with just the right touch of resignation. If I hadn't seen the forged documents myself, hadn't heard from clients and staff about his unauthorized contacts, I might have doubted my own perception. I'm not interested in assigning blame, Drew. I'm interested in protecting what I've built and finding a path forward. that respects both of us. By sneaking out when I'm not home? By sending emails to my professional contacts disavowing me? That's your idea of respect? His voice hardened. You know, the prenup works both ways, Jessica. The lifestyle clause you're so concerned about, it has implications for spouses who abandon the marriage without reasonable attempt at reconciliation. Something to consider before you walk out that door. The threat was veiled but unmistakable. He was suggesting that my leaving could trigger the lifestyle clause against me, potentially costing me financially in any divorce proceedings. It was the same manipulative strategy he'd employed at Corsica, using the legal agreement meant to protect both of us as a weapon. I've considered everything, I said, refusing to be intimidated. And I'm still leaving. Drew's expression shifted, the mask of reasonableness falling away completely. This won't end well for you or for PixelPerfect. I have resources you can't match, connections you need, and 7 years of insight into how you operate. Is that really a fight you want to have? There it was, the real Drew, the one who viewed relationships as transactions and people as assets to be leveraged. It's not the fight I wanted, I admitted, but it's the one you chose when you decided my company was yours to claim. He studied me for a long moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. You've changed, he said finally, an edge of genuine surprise in his voice. The Jessica I married would never have walked away from our life together. From everything we've built. You're right, I agreed, feeling a strange calm despite the tension crackling between us. I have changed. I've remembered who I was before, the woman who built a company from nothing, who took risks and trusted her instincts, the woman who wouldn't compromise her integrity, even for someone she loved. I picked up my laptop bag, the last item remaining. That's the woman who's leaving. Drew didn't follow as I walked out of the bedroom, down the hallway that displayed professional photos from our carefully curated life together, past the kitchen where we'd shared thousands of meals. He remained where I'd left him, silent and still, perhaps calculating his next move in a game I was no longer willing to play. Karen was waiting in the car, engine running, eyes alert for any sign of trouble. All good? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat, my laptop clutched against my chest like a shield. Let's go, I said simply, not looking back as we pulled away from the building that had been my home for the past 6 years. The finality of the moment hit me. I had just walked away from my marriage, from the life I'd built with Drew, from the future we'd planned together. The grief I expected was present but muted, overshadowed by a surprising sense of relief. Whatever came next would be challenging, possibly painful, but it would be honest. The pretense was finally over. My new apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning, sterile, impersonal, waiting to be inhabited. Karen helped me bring in the essentials, arranging toiletries in the bathroom and hanging clothes in the empty closet with efficient movements. The security specialist Tom had arranged arrived promptly at 7 p.m., changing the locks despite the property manager's assurance that no one else had keys. Better safe than sorry, he said, handing me new keys and demonstrating the additional deadbolt he'd installed. Especially in situations like this. When both Karen and the security specialist had left, I stood in the center of the empty living room, surrounded by boxes and the scattered remnants of my married life. The silence was absolute in a way I wasn't used to. No background music that Drew would have playing, no gentle hum of conversation from the next room, no sense of another presence sharing the space. Just me, my belongings, and the uncertain future stretching before me. My phone had been silent since I left the condo, no calls or texts from Drew. The lack of immediate reaction was concerning in its own way. Drew wasn't one to accept defeat or walk away from what he wanted. He was strategizing, regrouping, preparing for the next phase of a battle I had hoped to avoid but now had to win. I unpacked methodically, finding comfort in the simple physical tasks. Clothes in drawers, toiletries arranged in the bathroom, important documents secured in the small safe the apartment provided. With each item placed, each space organized, I reclaimed a small piece of control over my life. By midnight, the apartment still didn't feel like home, but it felt secure, a base from which to manage whatever came next. Sleep eluded me despite my exhaustion. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the strange noises of a new building, my mind cycling through the day's events and potential scenarios for tomorrow. Would Drew come to the office? Would he attempt to contact clients again, despite the formal communication I'd sent? Would he escalate legally now that I'd physically left the marriage? The questions had no immediate answers, and eventually I drifted into restless sleep, dreams filled with fragments of arguments and unsigned contracts. Morning came too quickly, gray light filtering through blinds I hadn't properly closed. For a disorienting moment, I didn't recognize my surroundings, reaching automatically for Drew's side of the bed before reality rushed back. I was alone in my new apartment, having walked out on my marriage the previous evening. The magnitude of that decision settled over me as I prepared for work, choosing a structured black dress and bold red blazer, armor for whatever the day might bring. The PixelPerfect offices were unusually quiet when I arrived, the creative energy that typically filled the space muted by uncertainty. My team tried to maintain normalcy, but the sidelong glances and hushed conversations that stopped when I approached revealed their awareness that something significant was happening. News traveled fast in a company our size, and the formal communication about Drew had undoubtedly sparked speculation. Lisa appeared at my office door within minutes of my arrival, coffee in hand and concern etched on her face. "You okay? You look like you haven't slept." "I moved out last night," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Drew came home early and caught me in the act. It wasn't the smooth exit I'd planned. Lisa winced. "Confrontational?" "Surprisingly controlled, which is almost more worrying. He made veiled threats about resources and connections, implied I was violating the prenup by leaving without attempting reconciliation." I took a fortifying sip of coffee. "But he didn't try to stop me physically or create a scene." "That's something, at least." Lisa settled into the chair across from my desk. "The office is secured, new codes on all the doors, and security has his photo with instructions that he's not permitted entry without explicit authorization from you. IT implemented additional password protections on all systems overnight, and we've alerted the reception team to redirect any calls from him to your assistant, who will take messages but not put him through." The practical protection measures were reassuring, but also surreal. We were essentially treating my husband as a security threat to the company he'd claimed to support. "Thank you for handling all that. Has there been any contact from him this morning?" Lisa shook her head. "Nothing yet, but it's early." As if on cue, my assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Jessica? Tom Wilson is on line 1 for you." I exchanged glances with Lisa before answering. "Tom, good morning." "Jessica, I wanted to update you before your day gets underway. Drew's attorney contacted Patricia first thing this morning. They're requesting a formal mediation session regarding both the prenuptial safeguard clause and your company ownership." Tom's voice was carefully neutral, professional. "They're claiming that your departure from the marital home constitutes abandonment under the lifestyle clause, potentially invalidating the safeguard protection you activated." It was exactly the move Drew had hinted at during our confrontation. "That sounds like the threat he made last night. What's Patricia's take?" "She doesn't think it has merit. Leaving a potentially volatile situation following documented coercion attempts doesn't constitute abandonment in any reasonable interpretation. But it does indicate their strategy, trying to use the prenup against you while continuing to challenge the business ownership provisions." I processed this information, trying to see the chess game from all angles. "So they're still pursuing partnership in PixelPerfect, but now they're also trying to trigger financial penalties against me for leaving?" "Essentially, yes. It's a two-pronged approach. Pressure on both your company and your personal finances. Tom paused. There's more. Drew filed for divorce this morning. The news shouldn't have been shocking. Our confrontation last night had made it clear the marriage was over. But hearing it stated as legal fact still landed like a physical blow. 7 years of partnership, of shared dreams and plans, formally, ended with paperwork filed by someone who had once promised to love me forever. That was fast, I managed, aware of Lisa's concerned gaze. It's a tactical move, Tom explained. Filing first gives him certain procedural advantages, and the timing, immediately after you left the marital home, supports their abandonment narrative. But it doesn't materially change our approach. We still need to focus on protecting PixelPerfect, while ensuring the prenup functions as intended. After discussing next steps and scheduling a meeting for later that day, I hung up and turned to Lisa, who had remained silent during the call, but whose expression told me she'd understood the general direction. Drew filed for divorce, I confirmed. And he's challenging both the business protection clause and claiming I abandoned the marriage by leaving. Lisa's response was immediate and fierce. That's ridiculous. He threatened you, forged documents, tried to hijack client relationships, and he's claiming you abandoned him? That's some world-class gaslighting. Her indignation was validating, a reminder that I wasn't crazy for recognizing Drew's behavior as problematic. Apparently it's all part of the strategy, I said, attempting lightness that fell flat. Make me defend myself on multiple fronts so I'll be more willing to compromise on PixelPerfect ownership. Not going to happen, Lisa stated with absolute certainty. We've got your back, Jess. The whole team does. Whatever he throws at you, you're not facing it alone. Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that while my marriage had crumbled, I still had a community of support, colleagues who valued my leadership, friends who understood my worth, professionals who recognized the legitimacy of my position. Drew might have resources and connections, but I had something equally valuable. People who believed in me and in what I'd built. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of client calls and creative reviews, normal business activities that felt increasingly disconnected from the personal and legal tempest brewing in the background. By lunchtime, I had settled into a strange liminal state, professionally engaged but emotionally vigilant, waiting for the next development in a conflict that threatened both my company and my sense of self. It came at 2:17 p.m. in the form of an email from Drew. Unlike his previous communications, this one was formal, almost cold, with none of the emotional manipulation that had characterized our recent interactions. Jessica, my legal team has advised that all future communication should be through counsel, but I wanted to extend one final opportunity for an amicable resolution before this becomes even more adversarial. I am willing to drop both the lifestyle clause claim and the partnership demand in exchange for a consulting arrangement with PixelPerfect, terms to be negotiated, and a revised divorce settlement reflecting my contributions to your professional success. This offer expires at 5 p.m. today. After that, we proceed with full legal action on all fronts. Consider carefully, Drew. The message was classic Drew, presenting himself as reasonable while delivering an ultimatum disguised as compromise. The consulting arrangement was just partnership by another name, a foot in the door that would inevitably expand once established. And the revised divorce settlement undoubtedly meant circumventing the prenup's financial protections. He was offering to drop his current claims in exchange for essentially the same outcome through different means. I forwarded the email to Tom and Patricia with a brief note. Drew's latest compromise. Thoughts? Their response was swift and aligned with my own assessment. This wasn't a genuine attempt at resolution, but a tactical reframing of his original demands. Their advice was unequivocal. Do not engage directly, let the 5 p.m. deadline pass without response, and continue with our planned legal strategy. As I closed the email thread, a strange sense of clarity settled over me. Drew's message had inadvertently confirmed what I needed to know. There was no path to genuine compromise, no version of resolution that didn't involve surrendering what I'd built. The marriage I thought I had, the partnership I believed in, had been an illusion. The real Drew Parker had finally revealed himself fully, and in doing so, had freed me from any lingering doubt or misplaced loyalty. At precisely 5:01 p.m., as Drew's arbitrary deadline expired without my response, I felt something unexpected, not anxiety or grief, but a profound sense of liberation. Whatever legal battles lay ahead, whatever financial or personal costs I might bear, I had maintained my integrity and protected what mattered most. PixelPerfect remained mine, a creation that reflected my vision and values. And I remained myself, not Drew Parker's wife, not a supporting character in someone else's success story, but Jessica Taylor, founder and creator, finally standing entirely on my own terms. 6 months can change everything. The crisp autumn day found me standing before the courthouse steps, smoothing down my navy blue suit and taking a deep breath of Portland's leaf-scented air. Tom Wilson stood beside me, briefcase in hand, his expression quietly confident. "Ready?" he asked, checking his watch. "We've got 15 minutes before we need to be inside." I nodded, surprisingly calm considering what awaited us. Today marked the final hearing in what the local design community had started calling the PixelPerfect battle, the conclusion to a legal fight that had consumed half a year of my life and tested every boundary I thought I had. The journey to this moment had been brutal but clarifying. After Drew's 5 p.m. ultimatum expired and I hadn't responded, he'd made good on his threats, launching a multi-front legal assault that targeted both my company and my financial security. His team filed motions challenging the prenuptial agreement, claiming my abandonment had invalidated its protections. They submitted the forged documents as evidence that I had previously agreed to his partnership in PixelPerfect. They even attempted to freeze company accounts, arguing that as my spouse, Drew had claim to all business assets during divorce proceedings. What Drew hadn't anticipated was the community that rallied around me. Lisa organized the entire PixelPerfect team to sign affidavits confirming Drew had never held any official position or performed any essential function within the company. Karen connected me with industry colleagues who provided statements about my sole leadership of the business since its inception. Most surprisingly, 3 of Drew's former colleagues came forward with evidence that contradicted his claims, including emails where he had discussed finally getting a piece of Jessica's company as if it were a new ambition, not the formalization of an existing agreement. The forensic analysis proved decisive. The digital expert Patricia hired found conclusive evidence that the emails Drew presented had been backdated, with metadata showing they'd been created just days before he presented them to her office. The handwriting expert identified subtle inconsistencies in the supposedly handwritten notes, suggesting skilled forgery rather than authentic documentation. Together, these findings not only invalidated Drew's claims but raised serious questions about his legal ethics. "Jessica." Tom's voice pulled me back to the present. "Patricia just texted. She's inside already, final row on the left. Drew and his attorney arrived a few minutes ago." The mention of Drew sent a familiar tightness through my chest, though the sensation had dulled over the months. I hadn't seen him since the preliminary hearing 3 months ago, when he'd sat across the courtroom in an impeccably tailored suit, his expression a careful mask of reasonable disappointment. Even then, facing overwhelming evidence of his forgeries and manipulation, he'd maintained the performance of the wronged husband, the supportive partner whose contributions had been callously dismissed. "How does he look?" I asked, a question born more of tactical interest than emotional connection. Tom gave a slight shrug. "Like someone who knows he's lost but is determined to save face." His attorney requested this final hearing despite Patricia's warning that the judge's preliminary ruling is unlikely to change. That sounded like Drew, unable to accept defeat even when it was mathematically certain. The judge's preliminary ruling had been unambiguous. The prenuptial agreement's business protection clause was valid and enforceable. There was no credible evidence that I had agreed to make Drew a partner in PixelPerfect, and his documented attempts to claim ownership through coercion had triggered the safeguard provisions, resulting in significant financial penalties within our divorce settlement. "Let's get this over with," I said, starting up the courthouse steps. The weight of the past 6 months, the sleepless nights, the constant strategic adjustments, the energy diverted from creative work to legal defense, had left me exhausted but resolute. Today would mark the end, one way or another. The courtroom was sparsely populated, just a handful of observers besides the key participants. I spotted Patricia immediately, her compact form and direct gaze a reassuring presence in the front row. Drew and his attorney sat on the opposite side, engaged in hushed conversation. Despite my determination not to look directly at him, my gaze was pulled inexorably to the man who had been my husband for 7 years. Drew looked smaller somehow. Still handsome, still perfectly groomed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, but diminished in a way I couldn't immediately identify. When he glanced up and our eyes met briefly, I understood what had changed. The confident charm that had once seemed so magnetic now appeared calculated, studied, like an actor's technique rather than genuine charisma. I could see the machinery behind the mask, the strategic consideration in every gesture and expression. I took my seat beside Tom, focusing on the papers before me rather than the man across the aisle. The proceedings began with practiced formality, case numbers recited, appearances noted, preliminary matters addressed. The judge, a woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and an efficient manner, reviewed her notes before addressing the courtroom. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, including forensic analysis of disputed documents, witness testimony, and financial records, this court upholds its preliminary ruling in all aspects. She looked directly at Drew's attorney. "Counselor, your motion to reconsider is denied. The prenuptial agreement stands as written, with the business protection and safeguard clauses fully enforceable." Drew's jaw tightened visibly, the only crack in his composed facade. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering something that Drew dismissed with a slight shake of his head. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "this court finds compelling evidence that Mr. Parker attempted to claim ownership of PixelPerfect Design through coercive means, including but not limited to ultimatums, threats regarding manufactured evidence, and the submission of forged documents to this court." Her expression hardened. "Let the record reflect that the court views these actions with extreme concern and reserves the right to refer this matter to the Bar Association for review of potential ethical violations." The implied threat of professional consequences hung in the air. Drew's attorney straightened, his expression carefully neutral while Drew himself remained motionless, his gaze fixed somewhere above the judge's head. Given these findings, the court concludes that Ms. Taylor's company, PixelPerfect Design, remains her sole property as specified in the prenuptial agreement. Furthermore, Mr. Parker's documented coercive actions have triggered the safeguard clause, resulting in the financial penalties outlined in Section 14B of said agreement. She closed the folder before her with finality. "This ruling is effective immediately. Court is adjourned." The gavel's tap echoed in the suddenly silent room. It was over, the battle I hadn't wanted but couldn't avoid, the conflict that had consumed half a year and threatened everything I'd built. PixelPerfect remained mine, protected by the very agreement Drew's family had insisted upon to safeguard their wealth. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tom and Patricia exchanged satisfied glances as we gathered our materials. "A complete victory," Tom said quietly. "Everything we argued for, confirmed without qualification." I nodded, relief washing through me in a wave that left me momentarily lightheaded. What happens now? Paperwork, mostly, Patricia replied. The divorce decree will be finalized within 30 days. The financial settlement reflects the prenup's penalties, which means Drew receives substantially less than the standard division of marital assets. Your company remains entirely separate, with no claims against it from this point forward. As we prepared to leave, I noticed Drew standing alone near the courtroom doors, his attorney already gone. Our eyes met across the half-empty room, and after a moment's hesitation, he walked toward me with measured steps. Tom shifted protectively, but I touched his arm, indicating I could handle this final conversation. Congratulations, Drew said when he reached us, his voice carrying none of the warmth it once had. You won, completely. I studied him, searching for the man I'd once loved within this polished stranger. This wasn't about winning, Drew. It was about protecting what I built. A flash of the old anger crossed his face before he controlled it. What we built, Jessica. That's something you never understood. Marriage is partnership. Everything achieved during those years is joint accomplishment. Even now, even after overwhelming evidence and a judge's unequivocal ruling, he couldn't acknowledge the fundamental flaw in his perspective. Partnership requires mutual respect, I said quietly. You never respected that PixelPerfect was mine, that my career was mine. You saw my success as something you were entitled to claim rather than something to celebrate alongside me. Drew's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or simply calculation of his next move. Well, it hardly matters now. You've got your company, free and clear, and I've learned a valuable lesson about prenuptial agreements. His attempt at a casual smile didn't reach his eyes. No hard feelings? The audacity was so perfectly Drew that I almost laughed. After threats, forgeries, and 6 months of legal warfare, he stood before me offering closure as if we'd had a minor misunderstanding. Goodbye, Drew, I said simply, stepping around him toward the courtroom doors. I felt his gaze follow me but didn't look back. Whatever connection we'd once shared had been severed long ago, not by legal proceedings, but by the moment he decided my work was his to claim. My success was his entitlement. My boundaries were his to ignore. Today merely formalized what had been true since that anniversary dinner at Corsica. Outside, autumn sunshine gilded the courthouse steps where Tom, Patricia, and I paused to discuss final details. As they talked timelines and paperwork, my attention drifted to the Portland skyline visible between buildings, the familiar landscape of the city where I'd built both my business and my marriage. One had survived, stronger for having been tested. The other had revealed itself as something quite different from what I'd believed. Jessica? Patricia's voice brought me back to the moment. Are you all right? I realized I'd been silent, lost in reflection while they discussed next steps. Yes, I said with a certainty that surprised me. Actually, I'm better than all right. And it was true. Beyond the relief of legal victory, beyond the security of knowing PixelPerfect remained mine alone, I felt something I hadn't fully anticipated, a profound sense of reclamation. I had reclaimed not just my company but my confidence, my boundaries, my ability to trust my own perceptions. The woman who had once minimized her accomplishments to keep peace with her husband, who had questioned her own reactions to his manipulation, had been replaced by someone clearer-eyed and more certain of her worth. I was thinking, I said, changing the subject deliberately, about that expansion proposal we put on hold when all this started, the office space in the Harlow building. Is it still available? Tom raised his eyebrows slightly, caught by the sudden shift. I believe so. Their leasing agent called last month asking if you were still interested. I am, I decided in that moment. PixelPerfect has outgrown our current space. We need room for the new creative team leases building and the digital marketing division. We're launching next quarter. Plans that had been suspended during the legal battle suddenly felt possible again. Exciting even. Could you contact them this afternoon? Patricia smiled, understanding perhaps better than Tom what this moment represented. I think that's an excellent idea, focusing on growth rather than defense. We parted ways on the courthouse steps, Patricia heading back to her office while Tom accompanied me toward the parking structure. As we walked, he glanced at me with professional curiosity. You know, most clients are emotionally exhausted after proceedings like this. You seem energized. I considered this as we navigated the busy downtown sidewalk. I think I've been living in a defensive posture for so long, protecting PixelPerfect from Drew's claims, protecting myself from his manipulation, that moving forward feels like finally being able to breathe again. I stopped at the corner, waiting for the pedestrian signal. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle. It was recognizing that the partnership I thought I had was an illusion. Tom nodded thoughtfully. That's often the case in these situations. The legal resolution matters, of course, but the personal reckoning is the true challenge. The signal changed, and we crossed the street in companionable silence. When we reached the parking structure entrance, Tom extended his hand formally. Congratulations, Jessica. Your company is secure, your future is yours to determine, and if I may say, so, you've handled this entire situation with remarkable grace under pressure. I shook his hand, appreciating both the professional respect and the personal encouragement. Thank you for everything, Tom. I couldn't have navigated this without your guidance. After he departed, I stood for a moment outside my car, keys in hand, absorbing the finality of the day's events. Drew Parker was now officially my ex-husband. PixelPerfect was definitively, legally mine alone. The prenup clause I'd activated had changed everything, transforming what could have been a devastating loss into a hard-won victory. But the more meaningful change had happened internally. The woman who had once accommodated Drew's suggestions about her business, who had accepted his framing of her success as partially his creation, who had doubted her own perceptions when he called them unreasonable, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone who recognized manipulation for what it was, who valued her own work enough to fight for it, who trusted her instincts even when others attempted to undermine them. As I started my car and pulled onto the street, heading not home, but to the PixelPerfect offices where my team awaited news of the hearing, I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. The anniversary dinner that had seemed like an ending, the night Drew revealed his true priorities with a demand disguised as partnership, had actually been a beginning. The beginning of reclaiming not just my company, but myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.